Hello and welcome to the complete Pea Auger installation guide for John Deere 600D series and 936D headers. Pea Augers are made by Combine World Manufacturing, a division of Parts ASAP. And part 1 is pre-assembling the left-hand side Pea Auger. So before we get started, we do want to make sure we have everything we need to install the Pea Augers. Typically you'll get 2 boxes, one for each side, and then those large cross augers themselves. So please feel free to pause this portion of the video if you need to. For your main components, you do have those augers. Then you're going to have 2 drive end brackets with the motors on them, and then 2 idle end brackets with the bearings on them. And then you're going to have the shields that go on the back of the header that match each of those that are going to lock them on. You're also going to have 2 idle hubs. So if you have a 936D header, you're going to have the exact same set of components. It's just that your brackets are going to have a slightly different shape just to accommodate some of the components on the back of the header. Now for the hydraulic parts, you're going to have 4 thicker hydraulic hoses. It's going to be 2 with a 90-degree fitting and 2 with a straight fitting. You're going to have 1 thinner hydraulic hose. You're going to have 4 couplers that go in the motor outlets there on top. You're going to have 2 small elbow fittings. One's going to be pre-installed in the left-hand side motor and one loose. And then you're going to have 1 compound fitting. We'll talk about that when we get to the drain kit install. So for hardware, you're going to have 2 lock collars. And then a bunch of bolts with spring washers in 2 different sizes. Those are for the idler hub and the motor, for attaching those onto the Pea Auger itself. Then you're going to have a whole bunch of carriage bolts that are going to be used to attach those 2 sets of brackets together.
Off with the idle side shaft. 4 bolts, 4 half-inch bolts, hold that on.
So Shane here is just going to install those. As you can see, that's how you tell which end gets the idler hub. The holes are closer to the center there. Yeah, so these have got the spring washers on them. Set them in there, and then just tighten them up. Great, so that's the idler side. So it's got the idler hub shaft on it. Next we'll move on to putting the motor on the other end with the motor bracket. You can see that there's a different design. They're closer to the edge, and it matches the design on that diamond plate that's on the other side of the motor on the bracket. So that's the only way it can go on, but it's just easier to see visually which one is which based on where the holes are. And this is a little bit more awkward getting these all in there just because of the way everything's positioned. So you're going to have to rotate it as you go along. You won't be able to use some power tools on this probably. You'll just want to do it by hand. And once those are all tight, then we'll get this whole assembly now with the idler hub shaft at one end and the motor on the other. We'll lift it onto the header. So that's part 2. We're going to install the left-hand side Pea Auger. Okay, so yeah, you could do this with 2 people, but if you have a lifting machine, it does make it a little simpler. So we're just going to use our lifting machine here. And we're going to lift that up and over and put it onto the header. So we're going to line it up. Now on a 35 or a 40, you can line up the motor end with essentially the end shield. On a 45-foot, you want to make sure that you overlap the center canvas significantly. As you can see there, it does overlap here. This is a 35. So once we're here and we've got it in place, we'll start attaching it to the header itself using those carriage bolts and the other bracket, as you can see here that Shane's got.
Bracket goes around those.
Right, so yeah, as you can see, it fits around the components on the back. If you have a 936D, it'll be similar. So, but it will look, yeah, it'll look a little different just to accommodate what's on the back of a 936D. Okay, so yeah, these carriage bolts go across with the nuts. There's going to be 4 of them for each set of brackets that are going to just clamp around that back crossbar there. So
Bolt underneath here that you gotta be clear of for your big 3/4 inch bolt also. Keep everything loose until you get everything
attached. So you do have to kind of make sure that it lines up around everything that's under there. So you may have to start over or just adjust one of them as you go just to make sure you can get it on there correctly. It's a bit tricky, so the ones in the center are a lot more straightforward. And that's what we're going to do next. We're just going to go to the center, we're going to do the same thing, with the idler bracket. So that's going to be the one that has the bearing in it for that idler shaft that we just installed to go into. So as you can see here, Shane's just installing that on. So you get it started there, but you probably want a rubber mallet just to move it on there safely. So this is also the only component of the Pea Auger you want to make sure is consistently greased. It's a lot simpler design than our Macton Pea Auger. So that's the main area that requires grease. As you can see, it's very similar to the other bracket in that we are, just hooking that up with the carriage bolts. It's very similar to the other side. Once we get that on there, we can tighten these up and lock it in place. So that's going to be our left-hand side locked in place. Once we got that all firmed up, we're going to put the locking collar on.
Make sure you put your locking collar on your idle shaft bearing.
So we'll just put this on here, and then we'll show you how to lock it on. You just want to tighten the set screw that's on here. Now we didn't do this on this one. We were just installing it on a header we had in the yard. So this wasn't actually going to go and out to a customer. So once you've got that lock collar on, this would be a good time to tighten up those nuts on the other end with the motor. And then part 3 is installing the right-hand side Pea Auger. So this is largely going to be exactly the same. It'll be like a mirror image of what we did on the other side. So of course, same thing. We want to install that idler hub with the shaft, just with our bolts with the spring washers there, the 1/2-inch bolts, the slightly larger ones. Again, these bolts are going to be slightly closer to the center than on the other side. So we get that set up, and then if we go to the other side, we've got them closer to the edge there. So, and this is where we put the motor, that diamond plate. These are the slightly smaller bolts with the spring washers. Again, it's kind of awkward, it's hard to get in there with power tools, but I think certainly actually having it lifted up like that is pretty convenient for putting them on, so it's a good idea. So we're going to now lower this into place. Again, you could do it with 2 people. We're using a lifting machine here. Again, make sure if you have a 45-foot header that you are lining up the end of the auger so that it overlaps the canvas. Your motor end won't be right at the end shield, it'll be in a little bit. The 45-foot and the 40-foot take the exact same length of Pea Auger. So just to be aware of that. Then the same thing here, we're going to secure the motor brackets across the crossbeam to the back of header brackets here with the carriage bolts, 4 carriage bolts, exactly the same as on the other side. And again, you are going to have to make sure that you have all the carriage bolts so that they miss. There's a bolt underneath there you're going to have to make sure you're clear of. Just leave it loose until you can adjust it over like that. Then we're going to go back to the center again and insert that idle end hub shaft that we just attached into that bearing, the idler bearing on the bracket there. Again, a mallet is going to be your friend here. Again, this is the component, the only component on the Pea Auger that's going to require regular greasing. Just make sure that that there is grease in that bearing, that's all. You should be able to tell visually. Okay, and then same thing here. We're just going to use those carriage bolts to lock the front of header bracket with the bearing on it to the one on the back. Let's get that all tightened up.
And then we can tighten everything up.
Yep, and then tighten both sides, and then should be locked in place.
Other side.
Part 4 is installing the Pea Auger motor hydraulics. This is how we're going to actually make sure that this thing runs. So So you've got those 4 couplers, you've got 2 for each side. You want to just screw those into the top outlets there on your motor. And then what we're going to do, we're going to go down here.
Which is the top one here.
Right, so this is the canvas drive motor. I'm going to take off that top hose there. Make sure you've got something to catch the oil, because the hydraulic oil is going to come out of there. Okay, so yeah, so we disconnect this hose. You can see it there in red. And we just take that off of that. And then we connect our 90-degree hose with that, which we're going to then connect to the drive side, that top outlet on the motor itself. Shane will go ahead and do this now, and we'll see how it works.
Then we take our 90-degree hose that comes with the kit, hook it up here, tighten it up after, run the hoses through so they're not in the way of anything. Bring this one up, not here yet. Then we attach it to this one here.
Yeah, so as you can see, it's going to that top one on the Pea Auger motor.
Good enough for now. And then we take
Right, this can be your other hose.
this hose, the one without the 90, the male end on it, back motor, back down.
Right, so yeah, so that one that goes in the lower side, it's going to come around and it's going to match up with that 90 degree that we just took off. So that straight end goes into that factory 90 degree.
This one to the hose that we just took off the motor. And connect them there. That completes your circuit for your hydraulic system.
That's everything right there. You've got it all connected. And they hook up the same way on both sides. So on your right hand side, it'll be basically the mirror image. There's also a canvas drive motor there. So part 5 is installing the drain kit. Now this only happens on the left hand side. The right hand side doesn't have a drain. It's just how the John Deere Pea Auger works.
Hook that up.
Or sorry, the John Deere header, I should say, works in general. So you want to just attach that thinner hose there.
You disconnect the one off the motor here. Okay, for the drain case, you remove the 90 degree elbow from the John Deere canvas motor, and you replace it with our 90 degree with the JAC end. Thread that in there.
Okay, so just to review, there are 2 kinds of fittings. There's a JIC, which has that flared conical ending, and then the ORFS is an O-ring face seal. So that's what the John Deere uses typically on all its factory connections.
And then put the T-fitting on.
Right, so this goes on to the T-fitting that was in your box. It's in the kit.
Then you can take the hose that's coming from your Pea Auger, attach it to your T-fitting here. Here. Then because this one is going to have your ORFS on here fitting, you need to put this fitting in here. It's going to have that little flat on there. Tie that in. And then put the other adapter one on here. And then you can tie this one into this top end of the T-fitting. This is the one that's the factory John Deere hose, because it's going to have the ORFS. That's what John Deere runs on all their fittings. So then you just snug everything up, and that will have your drain case motor for the Pea Auger installed.
Right, so that's it. You've got everything installed. Your Pea Auger will be working now. Okay, so you just want to turn off the hydraulic flow to both the canvas and the Pea Auger, then engage the header, then slowly increase the flow. Observe how it's working. Just make sure it's turning the right direction, and check for any leaks if necessary. That's really it. Well, thanks for watching. If you want to see our website for installation manuals, accessories, and replacement parts, Remember, if you are within that 1-year warranty, just call us before you order a replacement part. You should be covered. If you have any questions, or if you're just watching for your own information and you want to order a Pea Auger for John Deere, give us a call at 1-800-667-4515.